Welcome to the channel. For this video, I'm going to be talking to you while I work on some bookmarks. And these ones are going to be fall themed. It might seem a funny time of year to decide to do these, but I guess it just kind of got in my head. Well, there were a few reasons I decided to get on this theme at this particular time. One was that I noticed a trend in the bookmarks I've been making to be on the blue, purple, pink spectrum, and so I wanted to use the other colors, partially for variety, partially so that my printer ink would be used up across the board. So I used green in my Hobbit Hole bookmark. So then I had yellows and oranges left, which of course pointed me towards fall things. And I always really enjoy fall decorations, whether they're these leafy things that I have, or whether they're fall flowers like sunflowers and things like that. But I also love how nature looks in the fall, and I love harvesting from my garden in the fall. I think a lot of what I like about it is actually that it's leading into Christmas, and then it's leading into the whole variety of family-oriented, cozy sort of holidays from Thanksgiving through New Year's. There's also Halloween in there, and Halloween is one of my absolute favorite holidays, which is kind of weird. As a kid, Christmas was always the top because of all the presents, and I think it's still the top because it's when the most family gets together. I see both sides of my family that time of year, whereas I see my mother's side of the family, and also we just spend an extra lot of time together. And there's all the other things that go along with Christmas shows, Christmas movies, all the church activities that go on. I really like Advent and all of that. Spiritually, I think Easter's probably my favorite because there's a lot of meaningful stuff around Holy Week. But the reason that I like Halloween so much, I think, is because it's a time when it is socially acceptable to dress up as all sorts of magical things, which I really like, and also to just think about magical, fun things, and just for magical things to kind of be a part of everyday life. Which is how I would prefer to live all year round, but in around Halloween, it's socially acceptable to do in public. So those are some of the reasons that I'm so fond of fall as a season, and why when it comes around, it just fills me with all sorts of good feelings. A negative is, of course, that that's also when the school year starts, so it tends to also be a very stressful time. But if I shove enough fall scented candles in front of my nose, I can usually cope relatively well. One thing I really enjoyed about all three of these bookmarks was that they were very organic. I didn't line any of them beforehand like I do with most of my bookmarks or illustrations in general. So it was kind of just putting more paint on and swirling it around or dabbing it in the case of and just seeing what worked. And it was very organic. It just felt really good to do. And I really liked how, as I put on more and more kind of layers of paint with my watercolors, it just added more complexity. And I'm always worried about when I add more to any kind of illustration that I'm going to wreck what I've already done. But these types of illustrations that are mostly color blending really lend themselves to that kind of thing. So on Instagram, I've been admiring a lot of quote bookmarks. Calligraphy is something I'm pretty new to. I started teaching myself like a month ago or so. So it's not super fancy. I haven't really figured out my own style yet. But I figured out, I think, how to make letters on a piece of art that are somewhat even and are also decorative. So that's, at least I can do that. I picked that particular quote about reading basically because these are not themed after a particular book. They're just very much fall themed / pretty colors themed. So I decided that a very general reading quote would be better than something from a particular book. So I chose that one. I really like that one. I really like discussing reading as a whole and how it affects us and how wonderful it is. And then for this leafy one, I'm very nervous about drawing maple leaves because I really, really love how they look, but a lot of times in the past when I've tried to draw them, they just turned out absolutely hideous. So in preparation for this, I just covered a whole page of my sketchbook in different ways of drawing maple leaves, and I used various references. Kind of figured out what way worked the best for me to draw maple leaves. And then a lot of the other leaves and stuff that are like heart-shaped or ginkgo leaves are a lot easier to capture the shape of, I find. So I was able to do those without too much practice. But and I also found with this one, much like with my flowers illustration, that putting in all the little lines of the veins of the leaves was quite soothing, and also just I really, really liked the way it looked filled in, which usually I'm not a huge fan of lines, but I've been using them more lately, and I'm thinking I'm growing more fond of them. And then some of these leaves, a fair amount are based on particular kinds of leaves, but some others are just very vaguely whatever I thought looked nice. I'd love to know what you think about line art / use of lines in your work, whether you like to have lots of lines or like to have no lines at all. There are a lot of watercolor paintings I'm very fond of that the lines are all very vague, and because the watercolors aren't as strongly pigmented as a lot of acrylics, or they're very sort of wispy, it's not really blended, but the edges are just really soft. I like those too. I really like a huge variety of art styles. I just like them for different reasons and kind of in different ways or different areas or different uses, I guess. I have my absolute favorites, like there are ways that I want to be able to draw paint, and then there's ways that I don't care to do but that I appreciate other people doing and I think look good or are good for the purpose they're being used for, like cartoons or comics and stuff. Like, there's a lot of different art styles among comics, some that are really simple and some that are very detailed, and that are detailed or simple in very different ways. Like, much like with movies, they use not color scheming, color grading, maybe, where they make everything kind of grayed down or yellow tinted or stuff like that. And I think that makes all sorts of interesting effects. I personally really like happy sort of art and very much stuff that looks really realistic. I'm really into realistic looking art, but I also look at stylized art and admire it quite a lot. It's just not exactly what I want to do. So how do you feel about art styles? Is there a particular kind you like to emulate? Do you have favorite artists that have similar art styles to each other, or ones that you would like to be like, or would you like to do something very different from the artists you admire? Since I've been making these bookmarks, I've been looking at a lot of other bookmark makers' work on Instagram, and so I've seen this huge variety. There are some I've been following, and I'll link as many as I can below. Someone makes bookmarks out of thin pieces of wood, very thin pieces, and they're like burned on patterns. Some are like the sword sting. They're very simple, most of these. So they're like line art of the sword sting with a quote. Or some of them are more complicated. Some of them are like a hobbit hole, similar in style to the one that I made, but different. And some are just quotes with like little swirlies or designs. And then there are others that do very good paintings of like Feyre and Rysand or other characters, and they have their faces, and they're very well drawn faces and very well drawn bodies. And I've seen other ones that are very stylized versions of Rysand and Feyre, very popular, but also other things. I've seen stylized hobbits, stylized Harry Potter characters, and I've seen just very simple quotes with like a flower or something. And then I've also seen quotes with a background of like starry, magnificent nebula type thing in the background. I really like all of them. I think they're really cool and wonderful. So those are all 3 of my patterns finished. If you like these or other patterns, they're available on my shop, which is linked below, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye!